While my original intention this Halloween was not necessarily to pick a set of games that were a little off kilter and predominantly featured damsels in really zany distress, here we are having this conversation. However, in this case, I completely missed out on this game. It flew completely under my radar, despite having a PS2 at the time. I literally hadn't even heard the name until just a year or two ago. But now is the time to do what I do and play a Capcom game that I hadn't before. Let's go, gang. Join me for a closer look at Haunting Ground. Greetings, everyone. This is the Hipster Snack. And to start, a little joke. If this game was about making coffee in a horror setting, it'd be called Haunting Grounds. No, seriously, I keep wanting to call it Haunting Grounds, but it's singular, Haunting Ground. Which also makes sense. The entire game takes place in just one castle. That said, this game was a PS2 exclusive released in spring of 2005, originally called Demento in Japan, and released to the English-speaking world as, indeed, Haunting Ground. Honestly, neither name really works, but details. The game opens with a dungeon of a dark, spooky castle, because of course it does. And the monstrous hulk of a man, Debilitas, yes, they really named him that, attempting to get at our protagonist, Fiona Belli, who is trapped within a cage. However, for some reason, the cage is left unlocked, or possibly unlocked by Debilitas himself, we may never know, and our scantily clad heroine, who is... oh, thank God the fan wiki confirmed she's 18, so I'm not actually going to end up on a list for this review. Anyway, Fiona escapes the basement and begins to learn that every single person here is a creep in one form or another, which is impressive given the cast is made up of 6 characters total. After which, she discovers that her only companion is a white dog named Hewie, who she will need to rely on extensively in order to safely navigate this puzzle-laden castle. And after putting some real clothes on, the game actually begins. And to start, the game is gorgeous. Seriously, the PS2 was a shockingly powerful piece of hardware, even by today's standards, but this game is so stylish and detailed. The cutscenes in particular are absolutely jaw-dropping. Serious time and attention must have gone into them, and making the enemies, collectively called the Stalkers, formidable and imposing in their design. Seriously, each area is just dripping with unique artistic appeal and amazing design choices. Each area is memorable as a result, which is good because the game is not huge. A singular, regular playthrough will probably cost you some 6 to 7 hours, and the world record speedrun is about 45 minutes long. So, yeah, good to know. And the audio work is great stuff too. While the OST is not in any hurry to end up in my collection, it does its job at building atmosphere and tension. The game relies heavily on its sound design, as the Stalkers rely on audio cues to try to zero in on your locations whenever they're nearby. And the sound effects are just really good. The tension is real, and it makes the entire thing nerve-wracking from start to finish, in no small part due to the audio design. Just fantastic presentation, absolutely. Gameplay-wise is, well, I'm going to be generous and call it a mixed bag. It's definitely a throwback to older games like Clock Tower or Alone in the Dark. The game uses fixed camera angles, many of which are not on the player's side, and you're free to move around and do adventure game things. You know, as lone defenseless female protagonists are wont to do. Fiona can move around, use items, explore areas, kick very weakly, run, do a backstep dodge, and hide in certain context-specific areas, among some other actions. Fiona's a horror protagonist and thus is kitted accordingly. As said, her kick barely does any damage on its own, though there is optional equipment in the game to make it more powerful, and generally running and hiding are superior options to direct combat. In a desperate moment, you can charge an enemy full speed and try to bodily tackle them to try to give yourselves an out, but it burns stamina like crazy, and in my experience, it's not the most reliable option. So you have to balance the old horror standbys of health, stamina, and panic. At low health, Fiona slows down and becomes vulnerable to additional attacks. At low stamina, you can't run or use the backstep dodge. Luckily, these all refill slowly over time when you're not having them depleted. Also, you have the other resource, panic. Fiona is, in case I haven't made this clear just yet, a horror protagonist and a relatively defenseless one at that, so sometimes her fear will overpower her, inducing her to enter into panic mode. Also, these annoying little spark-looking things will try to zero in on her, and if one does hit her, it will automatically send her into panic mode as well, causing her to lose control and run around wildly or fall over her own 2 feet, generally drawing all sorts of attention to herself. In short, do everything you can to not let this happen to her. So if Fiona is so helpless, what options do we have to defend ourselves, apart from the generally unhelpful kick? That would be Hewie. The game maintains a relatively complex AI pathing for our doggo, and you can take time to train and issue orders to him. See, the game uses fixed camera angles, much to its detriment, so the right stick goes unburdened by the presence of bothersome things like modern camera controls. Instead, we use it to issue orders to Hewie. Up generally giving him orders like go or attack, down for heal, left for scolding, and right for praising. The game's description of this can be a little deceiving at times, as it's really only hinting at the bigger picture. Hewie's AI can be trained to be better as you progress through the game. Hewie failing to acknowledge a command can be met with a stern scold, but successful behavior met with praise, and generally he'll begin acting more consistently within your orders. It can be a little difficult to parse at first, but since context is not all that important, you can train Hewie within the downtimes between enemy encounters. Also, I might as well mention that Hewie is pivotal to the ending you get in the game. The only way to get the game's bad ending is to abuse and mistreat Hewie until your bond falls with him to the lowest possible level. And I can't actually tell you what the bad ending is because doing so will get me demonetized. But you know what? I'm fine with that. Because that's what you get for being mean to animals, so screw you. The other endings hinge on both your positive bond with Hewie, but also how you deal with some of the boss encounters. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, obviously, but it is important to note there is a New Game Plus mode and several unlockables found within the game, encouraging multiple loops through. But here's where I get to the problems of the game. That being that while it looks like a game from a console generation after what it actually was, it plays like a game from 2 console generations prior. I have never been a fan of fixed camera angles, but I accepted them in older games as a logical limitation of hardware available at the time. The PS2 does not share this excuse. It honestly just makes some hallways super annoying to traverse, and some areas are confusing because sometimes the camera just doesn't move, resulting in the above becoming even more frustrating. Also, the enemy AI is largely luck-based, as when using a hiding spot, there's some non-zero chance the enemy will just find you. The idea being that relying on the same spot over and over again will cause them to become more likely to find you and cause you harm. However, there always seems to be some chance of them just finding you, which happened to me a bit more than I care to admit. Though, to be fair, that could have been bad RNG on my part, and that may not be everyone's experience. The chase quickly goes from exhilarating to exhausting, and by the end of my playtime with the game, I was more tired than Fiona, given my patience didn't restore over time because most of the stalkers operate on more or less the same kinds of patterns until their boss room finally comes up. While I can safely call it a throwback to older games, and that's novel in its own right, it doesn't stop some of these old tendencies from feeling like they're, well, very old tendencies. The game also really likes Fiona's physique. Like, a lot. It's very uncomfortable, I'll just be honest. I can see why this game did not light the survival horror world on fire when it was new. But that being said, I can't deny that I actually really was into it. The game moves at a brisk pace, the atmosphere is fantastic, the presentation is top-notch, and while I have my share of complaints and maybe some bad dice rolls to color my experience, I liked this game. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I loved this game, but I certainly did like it. One interesting thing early in the game is the plate press mechanic, which can lead to cheat codes on repeat playthroughs and an amusing Easter egg for people who know the legend of the golem. The game is littered with clever use of puzzle mechanics just like this all throughout its runtime. The macabre atmosphere and the intense focus on survival genuinely makes for a solid experience, even if certain aspects of the gameplay aren't the perfect examples of their genre. But overall, it's a solid title and it's worth playing. Alas, this is where I have more bad news. Capcom hasn't actually done anything with this game since its PS3 re-release, apart from a couple cards and recent Teppen blocks. So for now, this remains a relic of the past, much like the alchemical secrets discussed in the story, years out of reach with no hope for a new rebirth. For now, at least. And for now, the sign-off. So that was Haunting Ground. What did you guys think? Did you play the game for yourselves back when it was new? Or are you like me, only having found it recently? Leave a comment telling me which it is, and hit the like and subscribe buttons because not only does it help me out a bunch, that way you'll never miss a single video as we upload here 5 days a week. That includes reviews, Let's Plays, and the home of the Tomodachi Bros podcast where my bros join me to discuss all sorts of neat stuff. But no matter which it ends up being, I will see you there.